We are the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, which is our mission to unify the adoption community and elevate our diverse voices by promoting dialogue, understanding, and healing through education, awareness, and connections. I'm Jennifer Fahlsing, co-founder and board vice president, and your guest host for tonight. We are honored to have so many of you join us. If you would please, I know several of you had, share a little love down there. Let us know where you're from, and also if it's your first time joining us. Before I introduce Beth, tonight's guest, I will share a couple of reminders for you. See if I can find my screen share. And, yeah. So please remain on mute. Raise your hand on screen, or you can use the virtual hand button. You're welcome to ask your question yourself, but if there's something you would like somebody else to read your question for, you can send it directly to me or to Beth in the chat. And then we do have a happy hour Facebook group where if there's anything you want to discuss afterwards after the show, we can go there. This is a public meeting with no guarantee that information or identity is confidential. We do share the presentation portion of this show on not only our happy hour Facebook group, but on our YouTube channel. So just so you're aware that that's out there, but no discussion. And that's why we hold questions to after 8 o'clock hour. And just as a reminder, if you're experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thoughts, please contact a licensed professional or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. Find my button here. Okay. Well, I hope everyone here knows Beth because she's in the Zoom room every night, but every Friday night. But Beth is on the executive committee. She is the treasurer for NAAP. She is an invaluable person on our board. You need something done, Beth gets it done. So like I said, we just appreciate her so much, and we're grateful that she has an opportunity tonight to share her story because it's very interesting. So Beth and her genealogy-loving daughter launched a search back in 2016 to uncover the secret of Beth's suddenly revealed doorstep beginnings. While she had always known she and her siblings were adopted, the revelation that she had been left and found on a doorstep ignited a yearning to uncover the facts surrounding her birth. DNA solved the mystery, revealing a scenario that even as a fiction writer, she could not have fathomed, and immediately launched on an adventure that included reunion experiences, running the gamut from welcoming family gatherings in exotic locations to indifference and even to stunned devastation and more desperate secret keeping. While she spent most of her life on the sidelines of the adoption community, the unfolding of her own story awakened a desire to be involved beyond her personal experiences. One of the things that drew Beth to NAAP is the organization's drive to educate, offer support, and bring about reform, coupled with their expressed desire to extend a warm welcome to everyone in the adoption equation. In between churning out web content for businesses and candidly addressing relevant topics in her fiction and nonfiction series for the young adult crowd, Beth unravels mysteries as a genetic genealogy search angel. After solving the riddle of her own foundling beginnings with the help of a warm-hearted expert, she was thoroughly bitten by the genetic genealogy bug. She loves delving into DNA to pay forward to other adoptees the gift of finding long searched for answers. The story of her doorstep origins, positive adoption experience, and the sometimes overwhelming, always intriguing journey of connecting with biological family is chronicled on her website. Beth, if you could drop the link in for that. As it not so patiently waits for its debut in book form. Beth and her husband of almost 40 years who reside in Northeast Indiana enjoy spending time with family, piecing together family history and traveling. So everybody give a warm welcome to Beth.
Thank you, everyone. I am excited to be here tonight. I have to tell you, I am a firm believer in the power of story. I love coming every Friday night and hearing the stories. I think when we tell our stories, it helps us. And I know it helps other people when we share what we have been through and what we have experienced. And so I'm happy to be here tonight to share my story with you, which you got a little taste of in that bio. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. All right. My story begins in 1963, November of 1963, in the very location where Jennifer is tonight. When I was 3 weeks old, I was adopted by a young couple who had experienced the heartbreak of repeated miscarriages and were told they could probably never have their own child. The picture in the middle here is, I believe, the first picture my parents ever took of me. And then I just have a collection of other pictures with them that I like. When they got me in December, the Christmas tree was already up, and hence the Christmas tree with the baby underneath it picture. Over the next 7 years, 3 brothers joined our family by adoption. Each of us knew from before we even could understand what the word really meant, we knew that we were adopted. My mom said that she had known an adult who didn't learn of their adoption status until they were an adult. She thought that was a terrible thing to do to someone, and she would never have done that to us. So we all knew from the very beginning. You know, growing up, we didn't really talk much about adoption. It was just the normal thing in our family. It wasn't taboo. We weren't told we couldn't ask questions. In fact, I think there must have been little questions brought up here and there, because I remember my mom saying that we don't know anything about where any of you came from, and they were okay with that. In fact, they preferred it, not because it didn't matter that we had a past, but that they didn't care what our background was. They wanted us in their family. I wondered who my birth parents might be. You know, everybody wonders who you look like and get these ideas in your head. But very soon, I came to the conclusion on my own, not because anyone told me to think this, but I came to the conclusion that whoever had me couldn't take care of me, and they gave me to someone who could. I will admit, in my mind, I'm thinking 15, 16, 17-year-old teenage mom, that kind of a thing, but I really didn't spend a lot of time dwelling on it. About 25 years ago, I became aware of this thing called non-identifying information. I heard that this rather unstructured and subjective thing might yield a lot of information, a little information, or maybe nothing at all. But I decided to give a go. And I made a phone call to the clerk of the court in the county where my adoption had been finalized, as far as I knew, and asked for my non-identifying information. The lady puts me on hold, and let's see here. She puts me on hold, and she goes to see if she can't match up the number on my adopted birth certificate with my original. Well, I'm on hold for quite a while, and she comes back and she said, that number goes back to absolutely nothing, and I've never seen anything like this. Well, I was kind of bummed. And honestly, I thought, okay, this is God closing the door for whatever reason I'm not supposed to know. I'm not supposed to know now, maybe ever. And I kind of, stomped around a little, pouted and fretted, but I decided to, life will go on, and I didn't make any plans to pursue anything further. So fast forward to an afternoon in July of 2016. More pictures of my parents, because I like these pictures. And then here's my daughter with my parents at her wedding. My mom and my daughter are attempting to sort through 60 years of paperwork from my parents' marriage. We're trying to convince them to downsize, and they took prodding like that better from the grandkids than they did the kids. So my daughter is over there with my mom, and they're sorting through masses of paperwork. And the subject of adoption just randomly comes up. And out of the blue, my mom says, it made big news when your mom was born. Well, my daughter, who had long been a lover of history, had been working for a couple of years on a family tree, and she had dug through archives of the local newspaper, and she had come across the little blurb that said, Phil and Bonnie adopted a baby girl. And she says, you know, is that what you're talking about, Grandma? And my mom says, oh no, this news made the front page of the paper. And then my daughter says, my mom immediately has this look, this oh no look on her face. And she murmurs that she had said too much, and the conversation abruptly came to an end. My internet savvy daughter went home, and within 15 minutes, she uncovered this. You can see the whole article, right? Because I have this thing on mine. Okay, I'm going to move this to the bottom. There we go. Okay, baby found early Sunday on doorstep. She prints this article. She goes to my mom the next day and she said, is this what you were talking about? And my mom says, yes. And now I have to tell her. So the next day, my mom and I had this conversation. They had never planned to keep it a secret my whole life that I'd been found on a doorstep, but they also never made a plan of when to tell me. My mom very firmly said, you do not tell a small child that that she was found on the back doorstep at 5 a.m. on a cold Sunday morning, wrapped in a man's black wool shirt and a blanket, estimated to be 3 days old, having not been born in a hospital. And I completely agreed with her. I couldn't imagine as a small child being told that news and having any kind of a positive response to it. I wasn't angry with her. I wasn't upset, but immediately I was intrigued. I had this giant what now moment. It was as if someone had yelled plot twist, and things looked a lot differently to me now. I was a foundling, a term that I don't even remember ever being, that I had ever heard being attached to a person. You know, there is this first episode of the Waltons called The Foundling, and I've watched that series like a gazillion times. I have it on in the background while I do other things, but I somehow never really made that connection of what that really was. Well, immediately I was intrigued and I was consumed with curiosity. I've always been a curious person, but it exploded. And then on the heels of those two emotions, overwhelming sadness and heartbreak washed over me for the young woman who felt she had no other option than to leave a baby, newborn baby, on someone's doorstep. Well, by now my curiosity was raging. And also I had this intense desire that maybe I could ease the mind of someone who had been wondering for 50 years what happened to her baby girl. So despite my skepticism that a little bit of spit in a test tube could tell you anything of use, I ordered a DNA kit. You see, the previous Christmas, our history-loving daughter had begged for and received from us an ancestry DNA kit. She was so excited to learn more about her ethnicity. And when it came back, this really high percentage of English ethnicity, she was thrilled because she had always loved anything British. And so she was so excited about that. But we had looked at this list of DNA matches that came with her ethnicity estimate, and it might as well have been written in Greek. We had no idea what we were looking at. And all of a sudden, we have a greater need to delve into ancestry, and I'm trying to put my skepticism aside, and I ordered a test. While we waited the 4 weeks for my results to come in, we dabbled with my daughter's results with the help of this awesome, amazing search angel. Her name is Amanda Reno. Many of you may know of her through DNA detectives or foundling finders, either one. I say dabbled, meaning my daughter and I dabbled. Amanda dug in hardcore because she knows all about genetic genealogy and she knew what to do. So we're dabbling, and Amanda's really digging deep into my daughter's matches, and I'm wrestling with the why. Why was I pursuing this? What was my motivation? Did I really want to search, or should I just leave well enough alone? I felt I needed to answer these questions for me. I didn't feel it necessary to justify the reason for my search to anyone else. No one needed to give me permission to do this, but I needed to know why I was doing it. To be honest, though, at this point, my curiosity was so piqued, I really don't think I could have just walked away. I knew I didn't have a mom or a dad shaped hole in my life, but still, if I could find some answers and if I could help someone else know that there had been a happy ending to the story. You know, my mother's heart was just aching at the thought of someone leaving a baby and then never knowing, never having any opportunity to find out anything that had happened. And so I thought if I could help someone else and get some answers for myself at the same time, it would be a good thing. I realized that I might be encountering a complicated, messy, even horrific situation, because you don't just leave a baby on a doorstep if things are going great, right? So I tried to prepare myself for this. All of this 4 weeks of processing was good because it gave me time to come to the conclusion that I would still be me, regardless of what my DNA uncovered. I was still who I knew myself to be. So while we're waiting for the DNA results to come in, we decided it was time for a road trip. My mom shared she had always wanted to know where I'd been found, and she was very curious about the who, the what, the when, all of the details. So my husband and I, my daughter and her son, and my parents all loaded up into our van, and we drove just about an hour and a half to the city of Angola, where Jennifer is tonight. And we were going to visit the doorstep. Now, that little newspaper article had an address of where I'd been found, and it also had the name of the people who had found me. So our first sleuthing assignment was to see what we could find out about these people. And very quickly, with the help of Facebook, I discovered the granddaughter of the people who had found me. I was so excited to connect with her. And she was just bursting to share what she knew. She remembered the day I'd been found as if it had happened yesterday. And we had this intense 30-minute phone conversation where she relayed the details in such vivid clarity that I'm just seeing it all happen. She said that it was about 5 o'clock in the morning and her grandpa went to let the little dog out, Frisky, a major player in my story. 5 o'clock on a mid-November Sunday morning in Indiana is dark, okay? 5 o'clock in the morning. And I looked up the weather, it was a very cold day. So I'm assuming grandpa didn't leave little Frisky out for very long because he's just this little house dog. So Frisky leaps out the door into the yard, and sometime later, when grandpa opens the door to let Frisky back in, he notices something on the step. Now the step doesn't look exactly like this. There was no deck here before, but this is the actual door still as it was. The other picture at the bottom is the front of the house. So anyhow, grandpa opens the door, he sees something on the step. Well, it seems that Frisky was a little trickster, and the rag rug that normally laid on the step, Frisky would often wrap himself up in the rug, wait for someone to come and call him, and then shoot out of the rug. They said it was his favorite trick. And so grandpa sees Frisky on the step. He sees something on the step and he calls Frisky, but for some reason, Frisky comes bounding across the yard, leaps over the step into the house. Grandpa looks down, still noticing something on the step, nudges the something with his foot, and the something cries. This time it wasn't Frisky on the step, it was a baby. He scoops me up, runs into the house to his wife, and they hop in the car and drive to the hospital, where grandma happened to work. She was a cook in the kitchen. I was found to be in good health, estimated to be 3 days old. I weighed 5 pounds, 12 ounces. So for the next 3 weeks, I stayed in the hospital, even though there was nothing wrong with me. we presumed it was because I was small. Anyhow, they kept me in the hospital. The granddaughter Karma continued to give details about how over the years the family would often, it would just pop up. I wonder whatever happened. I wonder whatever happened to the baby. I almost became a part of their family. When I had asked Karma if she was interested in meeting us, not wanting to presume anything, and she says, well, of course I want to meet you because you almost were my sister. She was 8 years old at the time. Her parents had not been able to have more children, and they petitioned the court to adopt me. But the court, the judge, someone said, we feel like this child should go further away. And so they denied their request. As an 8-year-old child, Carmen obviously couldn't understand any of that. And she was very distraught. And she said, I was mad at my parents for the longest time because you were supposed to be my sister. And I didn't understand until I was older, all of the ramifications. Over time, I connected with an employee from the hospital who was an elderly lady at this time, like 85 years old. And although she had not seen me or worked in the nursery, she knew all about me being at the hospital. She was actually a good friend of Grandma Norma, whose doorstep I had ended up on. And she told me something that just was so touching. I know I was crying on the phone when she told me that Grandma Norma, when she would finish her cook duties at the hospital cafeteria, she would go up to the nursery and she would rock me. And she bought me an outfit. And at some point, hospital administrators learned that she was doing this, and they told the nursery staff, this woman is getting attached to this baby and we cannot have that. You have to tell her she can't do that anymore. The nursery staff said, no, we won't tell her that. We are going to let her continue to rock the baby. And unfortunately for me, of course, Grandma and Grandpa that found me have been gone many, many years. It would have been such a treat for me to get to meet them. But I have so enjoyed getting to know their granddaughter and getting all of these wonderful details from her. Okay, so lots of processing and pondering is going on in my mind. And finally, my DNA results come in. And immediately, Amanda zeroes in on who she thinks is my birth mother. She already had an idea from my daughter's results, and mine confirmed even more closely that, yep, I think that this is the woman. So she started to tell me about this woman who she thought was my birth mother. And I repeated over and over and over, but she's too old. Do you remember my expectation? You know, the little picture in my mind of a teenage mom. Okay. This woman Amanda was describing to me was 37 years old. She'd been divorced the year before I was born. She had 2 teenage sons. Now, this didn't fit any picture I'd ever had in my mind. Of course, I had no reason to have any picture, except you kind of do that. You know, you come up with these ideas. And I said, it can't be her. It can't be her. It can't be her. Amanda was very patient, very understanding. She said that they had learned that in this era, older women were more likely to abandon babies than were teenagers who at this point in time would most often have a parent more involved. Well, I still wasn't convinced. Okay. And we're just getting a first taste of this genetic genealogy. We're not very good at it yet, although someone had given us a tip. You know, someone knew someone who had a baby and then the baby was gone and on and on. Well, my daughter and I are exercising our skills and we're building a family tree because we actually have names of these people. And I liked the story. Teenage sweethearts, high school sweethearts, had a baby, later went on to marry each other, have several children, we're still together. And I thought, isn't that a nice story? I would like that to be my story. And so we are pursuing this, of course, not contacting anyone. The DNA results are laying right there. And Amanda says, okay, well, let's look at what you have and let's see what we can find comparing it to the DNA results. We found nothing. There was no connection to my DNA and this lead, this tip that we were following. Of course, I argued that, well, just maybe no one in their family has ever tested their DNA. Okay. you can see I'm holding on really strongly to this story that I liked. Amanda continues to build a case, look further in my matches to build a case further. In the meantime, my daughter and I visit a large public library about an hour from us that has this huge collection of city directories, because we thought, okay, we'll look up in the city directory and we'll find out that maybe someone from this other family, they lived, on the same street as that where I was left, maybe a few blocks away or something. So we go there and open the 1963 Angola City Directory. West Street is where I was found. So I quickly find West Street in the city directory. And I put my finger at the top of the page and I'm slowly going down. I'm looking for a name that's going to pop out at me that is connected with this lead that we've been following. Well, no names pop out. So I'm thinking, well, I remember when we were there, we drove around the block and it was this kind of cramped, tight neighborhood. So maybe the street behind. So I quick look up Google Maps. I found out the street behind West Street is Superior Street. So I flip a few more pages in the city directory and I again put my finger at the top and I'm going down block by block. And I let out what my daughter says was a very loud gasp. And all of a sudden I couldn't say a word. She's like, what have you found? And I couldn't say anything. I turned the city directory around to face her and I just pointed. I was pointing to the name of the woman Amanda had pegged as my birth mother. She lived in the house behind the house where I had been found. I'm in a daze the entire rest of the day. My daughter always wants to drive when we go anywhere, anyhow. So she's driving and I am just overwhelmed with, I don't even know what. I just cannot even process how this can be, but this looks like very convincing evidence. So we get home and we call Amanda, who, I should have showed you this already, sorry. West Street, Superior Street, you can see how just the backyards were adjacent. And I know that when we took our little field trip there, we drove around the block and we stopped right in front of that house and we were looking to see through the path that she would have actually walked to take me, not knowing that at all, though. We were just trying to really scope out the neighborhood. So, okay, we tell Amanda, who sees this as very convincing evidence, and she is quick to give us our next steps. Okay. Let's see here. Our next step. What are we going to do now? Well, Amanda's like, okay, we'll do this and this and this. And I am mentally yelling, wait. I don't know if I want to do anything. Not only was I not expecting this scenario, but my mother had passed. If this woman was my mother, she was gone. She had died already in 1990. Okay, when you think about it, she would have been 90 years old that year. She was born in 1926 and this is 2016. And so I didn't know what I wanted to do. Finally, Amanda very patiently waits for us to make up our mind, never was pushing us to do anything. I end up writing a generic, hey, I think we're related somehow letter to who would be my two half brothers. One who only lived 1 hour from me and the other who lived in Las Vegas. And I waited. I had no idea what was going to happen, but the brother in an hour away from me picked up the phone the moment after he opened the letter and read it. And he said, wow, this is interesting. I'm interested in family history. And I had said I would pay for him to have a test if he was interested in helping us figure out the mystery. Okay, we've said nothing about mother. We've only said somehow we're related. Well, of course he'll take a test. So I sent a test to him and I'm feeling a little ill at ease. I haven't lied to him at all, but I feel like I haven't been super honest. So it takes about a week for the test to get to him and I call him back. I said, did you receive your test? And he said, I did. But I have a few questions for you. It seems he'd been pondering this a little further and with the help of friends and probably family saying, Are you crazy? You're going to give your DNA to a complete stranger? Who do you think this is? On and on and on. He was a little leery, and I wasn't sure he was even going to do it. And I just knew I had to tell him the whole thing. And I said, I am looking for birth parents, and I'm wondering if it's possible that your mother had a baby in 1963. And he says, it is absolutely not possible. There's no way my mother had a baby in 1963. He said, I was 15, soon to be 16 in this time frame that you're talking about. And if my mother was pregnant, I would have known it. I said, okay. He said, are you still willing to take a test? He said, yes, I'm still willing to take a test. So he takes the test. His comes back in 3 weeks. And we are a very firm half-sibling match. Well, of course, I've had a little bit of time to process this, and he is rocked. This revelation completely rocks his world. So while he takes his time to process, I'm doing this. He had already shared some pictures with me, just in general of the family, because we're thinking broad family here. And you know how as an adoptee, you never looked like anyone. And it's so cool to think maybe you do look like someone. My mother's high school graduation picture and mine. And then we found this snapshot that said November 64 on the bottom. Now I realize those printed dates are when it was developed. And so some people develop their pictures right away and some people don't. But I figure this is about as close as I will ever get to knowing what she looked like around the time that I was born. So he is cordial to me and friendly and stunned. If you can mix all of that together at once, he's just stunned by the revelation. He looked at me and said, how did I sit beside her on the couch every night and watch TV and not know that she was pregnant? And I can imagine that would be a haunting question. Well, he wondered if we couldn't test with somebody else. And I said, absolutely. He said, I'll pay for another test. And so he comes to my house and he brings a test with him. And we are sitting in my living room and we're just chatting. And he is just watching me so intently. I mean, like super intently. And I'm almost getting to the point of being freaked out. And I kind of just stop talking. And he begins shaking his head and he says, sitting here talking to you and watching you is like talking to my mother. Your mannerisms are so similar to hers, and I can't get over how much you look like her. Well, I'm covered in goosebumps at him saying this, and I'm thrilled and I'm excited at the same time, thinking this is the neatest thing ever. He is seeing such a similarity between us, and I was very, very excited by that. We wait a while for these results to come back. He continues sharing about the family. He digs out more pictures. And finally, the results come back. He was rather ill-advised about the kind of test we should take, but it did not dispute the fact that we were half siblings, but it didn't offer anything more to us. So I've got another what now moment. What am I going to do now? Because we both were interested in knowing who birth dad was. Actually, he was more interested than I, because he's racking his brain to think about who could it have been, who was in her life at that time, who could have fathered a child with her. And although I wanted to know, my expectations were popping up again. My brain is processing and it's saying, okay, she would be 90. The guy is probably that age or older. He may not have even known I existed. You know, I already was worried about dropping a bombshell on these two maternal half brothers. This would be another huge thing. And do I really, really want to do this? And then to add to it, my highest paternal match was a third cousin. Well, third cousins share great great grandparents, of which we all have 8 sets. And so the match that led to my birth mother was a first cousin once removed. Well, that's easy. Okay. That's a great match to have. Third cousin, not so great. Of course, Amanda would continue to help us, but she was working on a lot of other cases. And so she was just like, we can sit on this, we can do whatever you want. Well, we were exercising our searching skills, and I'm waffling, but I'm like, you know what? He really wants to know. He really wants to know. So I'm just going to dig in. And I dug in a little, but it was daunting for this to be the first big thing that we're going to solve. This was daunting. But every day I would check my DNA matches and waiting for that new one to pop up. And wouldn't you know, 5 months and 11 days after my results came in, I had a close family paternal match. And she had seen the match even before my daily checking of my matches. And so when I got on and saw it and was so excited, there was a message that said, here's my number, call me. And so I called her, and my first question to her was, what do you know about centimorgans and DNA matches? And she said, absolutely nothing. I said, okay, well, you are either my half sister or my aunt. Based on this match, the ages aren't right for it to be a grandmother or granddaughter. So, and she said, well, honey, my dad got around a lot. So I'm probably your half sister. And I'm like, okay, all right, that's okay. And she was, let's see, she's 15 years older than me. Okay. I said, okay. And I said, well, let me tell you a little bit more about my story. So I start telling my story. And as soon as I say Angola, she's like, oh my, and more, oh honey, I must be your aunt because my brother went to college in that town. So within a very short time, it looked like we had solved the mystery. I took the name to my half maternal brother, who immediately recognized the name, but said, I never considered him a father candidate. Well, good reason for that. And right here, I will just say, always follow the DNA. Leads may come and go, tips, non-identifying information is sometimes totally bogus. Always follow the DNA. So I take the name to my half brother. She takes the situation to him. I asked her for 24 hours. I said, can you just give me 24 hours to process this? And I think she called him in 2 hours and left a message. And anyhow, she was excited. She was excited. She was really excited. She goes, he'll be fine with it. You don't need to worry about that. Well, my expectations were challenged again because he was very much alive and well. And the scenario was honestly one that even a fiction writer couldn't come up with. Now, shocked and astonished, this time it was my turn to be shocked and astonished. And my birth father, here's the story that I couldn't have imagined. My birth father was 20 years old when I was conceived. He was married. He had 2 very small children, a toddler and an infant at home, and he was a college student at the local college. He was not, I always repeat this, he was not one of my mother's teenage son's friends. He was what I would call a friend of the family. And they were not having an ongoing romantic relationship, so the exact details, I don't know. But while I was experiencing shock and astonishment, and honestly, I thought, okay, I prepared myself for a messy situation, right? This was messy. It was embarrassing to even think about. This is what he was doing. He was putting pictures together of his mother and me and my half sister, who happens to just be 11 months older than me. He immediately went on and on about how much I looked like his mother and his daughter. And he put this together. And he said, you will note how the pupils are, what did he say? Aligned and equalized. He's an engineer and he couldn't stand the picture until he had everything completely lined up. He couldn't have been happier. He couldn't have been happier. I'm like apologizing for, throwing a tsunami in his life, because that's definitely what it was on the maternal side for my half brother. And my birth father says, no, 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 this is just like a warm, gentle breeze. He was unfazed completely by it, which was also kind of, it wasn't what I expected. All these expectations just going out the window. Okay. This is what I told myself over and over. It is what it is. I couldn't change it. None of us could change what happened, 50 some years ago. It is what it is. It doesn't matter if it's messy, complicated, or embarrassing. It is what it is. It happened. And there was no reason it had to be a reflection on the person that I was, the person that I had become. And I reminded myself that I had told myself, you will be okay. Whatever your DNA reveals, you're going to be okay. And I had some long days of processing, but yeah, there was no reason I couldn't be okay with all of this. Okay, so I've kept my parents informed all along the way. It was interesting to me how curious my mom really was, and she kept that curiosity bottled up all these years. But she was really curious, and so I let them know right off the bat. I had a great set of parents. I wouldn't change anything about how I grew up. Okay, I didn't want them to think I was replacing them, because that wasn't the case at all. I just wanted to know, and my mom did as well. I don't mention my dad much because he's quieter. He doesn't talk as much. He was the hardworking, maybe more silent figure, but very, very much a part of the family. So I always want to let people know that it wasn't like he wasn't around or anything. So the mystery's completely solved. And so I call my mom and I say, when you come into town to get your hair done, why don't you swing by afterwards? Because there's something I want to show you. So then I call my daughter and I say, Grandma's coming over. Do you want to come over? And she's like, oh yeah, I wouldn't miss this for the world. So my mom comes over and I take her into the computer room and sit her in the chair. And on the computer screen, I have birth mom's picture that she had already seen and birth father's picture. And I tell her the whole story. And she kind of tips her head to the side, and she is staring at these pictures. And she says, well, we knew you came from somewhere. And I blurt out, that is the title of my next blog post. I just thought it was such an interesting statement. Now, sometimes when I say this, people laugh and sometimes people grimace. And I think it has a different connotation to people depending on what their situation was. But she then shared that this isn't anything like what I imagined. Her imaginings were similar to mine, teenage couple, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we knew you came from somewhere. And in that moment, I'm thinking, my parents said all along they didn't care what our background was. They wanted us to be their adopted children. But they knew we had past. They knew we came from somewhere, and they weren't afraid of it. They were interested in it and wanted to walk along this journey with us. So what begins now is a whirlwind of catching up and getting acquainted all at the same time. How do you make up for 50 plus lost years? I think the short answer to that is you don't. There is no way to recover that time. Soon after bio dad is revealed, things start getting a little strained between my maternal brother and I. Everything's half, but most of the time I'm not going to say half anymore. It just seems cumbersome. They get a little strange. He wanted to know who it was, but then knowing complicated things for him. His mind wouldn't let him quit thinking. And he remembered my birth dad. My birth dad didn't remember him. My birth dad remembered my mother vaguely, but he didn't remember a lot about her. He had complimentary things to say about her, but he really didn't remember much. He just kept saying that was a long time ago. He didn't doubt anything at all. He didn't want to test to confirm. He believed the science, and he remembered enough of her to say, yeah, that's probably the way it is. But my maternal brother, things just got harder for him to deal with. And so we just kind of let things on a pause. He's the only maternal relative I'd met. No one else even knew. And I didn't know if that was ever going to change. So we let things kind of sit for a bit. And in the meantime, things really begin to flourish on my paternal side. Okay. I have to tell you, none of my paternal siblings were surprised at all that dad had a kid he didn't know about. In fact, my sister said to me, I always wondered if there were more of us out there. He had had many wives and many girlfriends, very handsome, charming ladies' man, and they weren't surprised. And honestly, finding out dad had a kid he didn't know about is a totally different scenario than finding out mom or grandma had a secret pregnancy, told no one about it, maybe delivered the baby herself and walked across the neighbor's yard and left it on the doorstep. Totally different scenario for them. So birth father's side, they're all starting to test their DNA, not because they doubt it, but just because they want to get in on all the fun too, you know. And I began meeting paternal siblings. Upper left lives in Maine now, where my birth father is from. He is 15 months younger than me. My sister and I here in the middle, she lives in Hawaii, and she is 11 months older than me. And then the older brother here up in the corner in that very unflattering picture that I only show because I feel like we have the exact same facial expression. His wife was sitting across the table from us and she caught that. He is like 2 years and 3 months older than me or something. He was a little slower to get in on the meeting and wanting to get to know a surprise sibling, but the minute we met, there was a connection, and he's been great ever since. Okay. I loved getting to know them. We had all sorts of similarities. We had some resemblances here and there, but we had all these similarities. We were all close in age. You know, it wasn't like the 15, 18-year difference of my other two siblings. This was different. And I came to ponder this question, and I knew the answer right away. Can you miss people that you never knew? They began telling me stories and sharing pictures. And these are those three siblings growing up in this tight little age span. There's three of them in 3.5 years or something, I think is what it is. And I began in my mind drawing myself into these pictures. You know, I would have been right there. I would have been number 3 of the 4 of us. And it was just, I don't know, it was just really hard to describe how it made me feel when I would look at these pictures. And then on, I think it was our, I don't know, we've been to Maine twice, our first or second trip. I think it was our first one. The youngest one here, Alan, he, of course, took us to see all the beautiful sights in Maine, but he took us to some really personal places where they went to high school and where they lived growing up. And then he drives us around the back of this old building. And I'm like, what are we doing here? And there's a file folder of pictures that he had asked me to hold. So he stops in front of this, in the back of this old building by these cement steps. He opens the file folder and he picks up a picture and he holds it right up against the windshield, basically, right up in front of both of us. And it's the 3 of them sitting on the steps that we were parked right beside. They were the back steps of an old school. And I don't even know what it was used for now, but it was a school that they had went to, and it was in their neighborhood. So they played there. And I don't yet have a copy of that picture, but I want one. I had another one of those speechless moments. I could not believe we are sitting right here looking at the 3 of them. And I was so touched that he took the time to find the picture, look up the location, and, say, get in my car, I'm driving you over here, kind of thing. It was just one of those moments. And I just kept thinking, I had a great life growing up, but look what I missed growing up with my siblings. I have shared pictures of my mother. I don't share pictures of my birth father because although he was very welcoming and he said to me, you are a secret to no one. We even went to an extended family gathering where I met hundreds of cousins who were all so thrilled to meet Ron's new daughter. Okay, they all knew before we ever got there. They greeted us out in the parking area and said, "We know who you are and we're so happy you're here." I mean, it was just almost a bizarre situation. But he says, "You are a secret to no one. I'm thrilled to, find you and meet you, but he is such an extremely private person. He asked me not to share his name or his picture online because he knew I was blogging about all of this. And only if I am speaking at the local public library to a very small crowd do I ever show a picture of him at all. But what I do show instead is this. He moved to Hawaii in 1970. And after just about 2 months of us emailing back and forth, he arranged a trip for my husband and I to come see him. So this was out of our hotel room. And these are other great sights that we saw while we were there. So I only have a few pictures of us together because he also doesn't like his picture taken. In fact, we were in Hawaii 9 days and we were on the way to the airport to leave before he allowed me to take a picture of us together. How you can be welcoming and all of that and then still be like that, it's kind of a difficult line to navigate sometimes, but that's just how he is. So I do have a few pictures. But we also saw him the next year in Maine. He was from Maine and he liked to travel back there. So we went there and we took our kids and our grandson. And we got to see him again for a very short time. And that was in the fall. We went the next year in the summer. And it's a gorgeous place. And what's interesting is I feel a real connection to Maine. My one brother does live there. My birth father was born there and lived there for the first 10 years of his life, and he feels a connection. He doesn't like to travel, but he likes to travel back to Maine. And so we love going there, and it just feels like a place where I'm supposed to be for some reason. I'm not really even sure. I don't really feel that way about Angola. I have no relatives there anymore except in the cemetery. My mother's family was very small. She had one brother who never had children. So it's just a different kind of thing. And the relationship has not developed. That's part of it. This maternal family who only live, a number of them, an hour from me. The brother in Vegas, he's been estranged from the family for decades. So I don't anticipate ever meeting him. But these other people, they knew my mother. They loved her. They experienced life with her. I want to know these people because they're the closest thing I'm ever going to get to her. And strain continued, more strain, more irritation, more distress. And I have to tell you that the last time I saw my maternal half brother was 5 years ago today. We had a little trip to Angola together with our spouses. We went to the cemetery. We went by grandma's house. It was an intense day and I loved every minute of it. And I thanked him 1,000 times for it. And I thought things were okay between us. But the next week I found out that they weren't. He just couldn't deal with the fact I wanted to know the other side of the family. And he said, and I agreed with him on this, the only person who really knows what happened is my mother. He said, it is my mother, and she's not here to tell her side of the story or defend herself. And I understood that that was a hard thing for him to deal with. I am holding out hope that someday we will get back into what in the very beginning looked like it was going to be, a decent relationship. But he said something else that I have to agree with. He said, we are siblings by the most unusual of circumstances. We did not grow up together. We do not know each other. We weren't raised together. And that makes a difference. And that's what has made it hard. And I'm not sure what's ever going to happen. But as secrets tend to do, the secret leaked. His granddaughter took a DNA test and she sends me a message and she says, "Who are you?" To which I say, "You need to talk to your grandpa." Well, he was hoping she'd just leave it alone, but of course she didn't. So last year, I actually got to meet more than one maternal relative finally, 4.5 years in. The top left are my brother's 2 children with my husband and I, the granddaughter over here at the top right who tested her DNA. They were shocked. They had no idea that this had happened, but they dealt with it much better and much differently. They've wanted to get to know me and include me in things. And I have really, really treasured spending time with them just a couple of times and hearing about my mother from them and seeing pictures of her around their house. And my brother's children were 20 and 23 when she passed away. So they have lots and lots of memories of her. And then on the bottom here, the gentleman there is the first cousin once removed who led us to my birth mother. He lives in California, but he and his wife often vacation back in the Midwest. And so they were here last September and we got together. And we had a wonderful time visiting with them. And I am so thankful that they know the whole story. They know the doorstep, the whole business, the birth father being so much younger, all of that. And you know what they said? Things happen. They hold nothing against her, no ill will. They aren't, sitting in judgment or gossiping or anything. And so I'm so, so thankful for that, because I would hate it if someone's opinion of my mother changed because they learned about my existence and what had happened. I am firmly convinced that she watched to make sure I was picked up. She put me there between the dog being let out and the dog being called back in for a reason. If someone hadn't scooped me up quick, she could have rushed in the dark and picked me up and no one would have known the difference. But I believe in my heart that she watched and that she knew that someone had picked me up and that, someone had found me and hopefully things were going to be okay for me. I think it would have been a scandal had she kept me. I think it would have been maybe difficult on all of us. I'm speculating, I admit. I don't know, but she evidently felt like she couldn't keep me. So, okay. Paternal aunt who broke the case open for the paternal side. She wanted to come see me that first year on my birthday. So we connected in February, but she didn't come see me and bring her daughter along until November, because she said, I want to be with you on your birthday and we'll do whatever you want on your birthday. So they flew in from Pennsylvania to Indiana. And I said, well, I want to go to Angola because that's where all of this started. She goes, sure. So we go to the house where I was found. And she's like, well, get out. And we're like, oh, I don't know if we really want to do that. I said, we should have made, arrangements with the homeowner if we were going to do that, which we did previously. And she's like, oh, it'll just be quick. It'll be quick. And she was not to be deterred. And she says, you're going to sit on the porch and I'm going to take your picture. Well, I'm like, okay, I don't know her very, very well, and I'm not going to raise a lot of fuss. So quickly I sit there and quickly, of course, she had to snap 3 or 4 pictures. And my daughter and Aunt Donna's daughter, Honey, who would be my first cousin, were sitting in my van with the ignition in drive because they're ready to take off in case angry homeowner comes flying out or police come down the street to arrest us for trespassing or anything, but none of that happened. And so that was the end of a very pivotal year, 2017, meeting all these people, solving the mystery and all of that, and I came to the conclusion that I was found on November 17th. And I really don't think I was 3 days old because I just don't think she kept me for 3 days. I think she knew immediately what she was going to do. And I think the small town hospital wasn't very good at estimating how old babies were. And so I have a court appointed birthday that we found you on the 17th. They say you're 3 days old. 17 minus 3 is 14. We'll say you're born the 14th. So I don't know what day I was born. Probably only one person knows that. But I know that I was found. I was found on the 17th. And I've decided that being abandoned wasn't the focus of my story, but being found was. And so that's what I have decided to focus on, the being found part. And as Lynn mentioned last week, the processing never stops. You think you've got all of this worked out in your head and your heart. You get it and you're okay, and then something happens and processing begins all again. I think it's going to be a lifelong journey of processing. I told you how I believe in the power of story, and I like to write. And so I began blogging about this from the very beginning, as much for me as for anyone else. It was a huge help in processing what was going on. And so I do have a blog on my website under the tab, A Doorstep Baby Search for Answers. And someday I hope to make it in a book form, put it all together in book form with a lot more things to add to it. So that is my story, and I thank you for listening. And I'm happy to answer questions if there are any. I have not looked at the chat, so if there's things there, let's see here.
Well, thank you, Beth. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here so we are free to ask any questions.